Oh, for a second, I was like, I can't rewrite the whole site this week. It's been a while since I built out a product. So,
and it looks like the CMS, like all the components look really cool, like easy, like intuitive.
Yeah, she did a really great job. I'm really stoked about it. It's
Nice.
a little plug right here at the top of the show. We hired someone off of our platform to do a future release for our marketing site, and it's wonderful.
She crushed it.
Yeah. Well, welcome. I feel like you're also having a busy day.
I am. I mean, there are always busy days, but today's been a particularly good busy day.
Oh, I just noticed you're wearing a Highwire hat too.
I know. And you know what? An interesting story. Everyone that I've encountered that has noticed that it has called out that I'm wearing a Highwire hat they're always cool people. Literally always.
Really?
Cool. Yeah. Okay. I actually got special treatment at the Ryman Auditorium the last show I was at because I had this hat on. Like the dude was like giving me like cut in line status.
Nice.
I was like, Highwire hat, man. This is the key to life.
Apparently. I feel like that happens occasionally when obviously we have a lot of beer stuff from Colorado. So when people out here in Asheville see that and they've been there, they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Spent many of my dollars at these places.
Yeah, you've gone from beer hub to beer hub.
Yeah. And if we hadn't moved to Asheville, we were going to move to Portland. So
I'm seeing a through line here.
Yeah. Yep. There it is. And we actually, when we went on our trip out east, we checked out Portland, Maine, which is a big beer city out east. Really cool. I wish we'd spent a little bit more time there. But
I just love the whole, beer pub, the brew pub thing. And there's such good experiences. I don't know if you've been to the Sierra one in Asheville, but that's like, super, like highly recommended, like worth a trip to Asheville, worth a trip to Sierra Nevada to go do that. It's awesome.
It's like an adult playground.
I know. It's
yeah. It's usually like if, especially if we pick somebody up from the airport, like anywhere around high traffic time, go hang out at Sierra Nevada for an hour or two. Yeah. There are another couple big companies that have opened campuses out here. They're cool. Like I was going to say Fat Tire. That's not it. That's the beer. Wow. I drink there all the time. New Belgium.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. We like going there because it feels like a little bit like little flavor at home.
Yeah. I love New Belgium. And they're, who else is up there that people might know of?
Oscar Blues has a campus.
Oscar Blues. Right. Yeah.
It's a pretty cool spot too.
Is it?
It's all open, so I've never been there in the winter. That whole area of the state's really beautiful. So
yeah, I agree.
Now that we've kvetched about all of the great craft beer places around us, that is not what Gray and I are here to talk about today. Gray is joining me today to talk about the first email sent from space. I do feel like this is pretty fitting because the last one we did was the first, Tyler and I talked about the first transatlantic telegraph cable. So like to go from that to first email from space, kind of cool.
Yeah, and that was like what, 1850, like something ridiculously long ago.
Yeah, 1858, I believe. So today we're going forward from the telegraph, back from the future. We're going to August 9th, 1991 on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Aboard the Atlantis were two astronauts named James Adamson and Shannon Lucid, who decided to embark on an extraordinary mission of their own. Armed with a Mac Portable, which is a really cool, I don't know if you saw any pictures of it. It's about this big and it has just like a little flip-up screen. Like the very first prototype of like a MacBook, I guess.
You're going to look like something from Lost in Space.
Yes.
A phenomenon we've noticed since we've got on orbit here of the automatic disk ejection system that the Mac has, and you can see when we get rid of these disks, you're going to have to pay attention to where they go.
That's pretty slick.
So they were the first ones to try to send an email from space. In a message that combined humor, adventure, and a nod to the always classic Terminator, they wrote, "Hello, Earth. Greetings from the STS-43 crew. This is the first Apple link from space. Having a great time. Wish you were here. Send cryo on RCS. Hasta la vista, baby. We'll be back." Which I hope so. A more daunting message would really be worrisome. That traveled through the vast expanse of space and reached the Johnson Space Center in Houston on that day. To achieve this, they had to connect with Apple's proprietary network. They used a specially configured Apple Link software. This allowed their trusty Macintosh Portable to interface with NASA's communication system, which is pretty cool. I think that at this point, the Apple Link was only really set up for dealers and employees to use. So they hooked it up. This was like kind of one of the first forays into hooking it up to an external communication system, and it was NASA's. The computer that they used, it didn't even require like very many modifications. Still worked flawlessly in the weightless environment of space, which I think they have a lot of problems with in general. And it's kind of like this kind of marked, like I was just saying, we just talked about last week, the first time you could communicate with somebody on another continent. And here it is, like reaching the frontier of being able to send an email through space. And that was, I guess maybe 140 years. That's pretty astronomical growth for that long.
Right. On like on the scale of civilization, right? Like it's no time. It's a blip.
Yeah. I think my favorite part was the Terminator clip, which also kind of circles back because the last time we were on here, we were talking about another pop culture reference. Pac-Man. I think it's interesting that there are generally like a lot of ties between pop culture and things that are like significant in the scheme of technology. I think one of the other things we talked about on the podcast in another episode was like the Code Red worm, where it was named after Mountain Dew Code Red.
It's the same thing as putting an Easter egg in software for me. There's the idea that massive innovation is happening, groundbreaking things are happening that no one ever thought possible, that somehow some team somewhere figured out how to do a thing. It's alienating, right? Like you don't feel connected with that. And then you drop an Hasta la Vista baby in there and it's like, oh,
yeah,
like these people watch the same movies I do. It brings it like immediately back to like, this is kind of a we thing. Like I could live next door to the person who did that.
That's a really good point.
The humanization of that, where it takes something super foreign and then makes it like instantly tangible, right? And instantly relatable is a big deal.
Especially on the marketing team, we've been talking a lot lately about humanization. And it's like, how do you find those common threads of connection that still, make you interested in something that might otherwise be like sort of esoteric to you, and that's like you're saying, like a perfect example. You take something that's, how do you explain the complexities of sending an email from space at a point in time when email wasn't even really like a thing. We weren't emailing people in the early 90s.
No. There's the humanization, and then to your point about email and technology in general. I mean, we weren't really even, you had to connect. NASA obviously has some, security and all kinds of other, moving parts here. But just in terms of like the raw functioning of the technology, I mean, you're dealing with closed systems and proprietary protocols, and there was no way for an out-of-the-box system just to magically connect to NASA. No one was there was no out-of-the-box, right? Like
they were all in box for this.
Yeah, we built our own box, and your box is not, so So I think that the idea that this is also a story about, interoperability. It's about protocol, it's about integration. Like there's some sort of macro kind of interesting things here that, yes, it's about sending an email, but is it? I don't think it really is. It's about messaging. It's about, networks. It's about what's the logical extreme of that you see. I mean, this was a long time ago. So we've seen the logical extension of what that looks like today. And
it was maybe 20, 25 years before that where there was even interoperability among like a system created by a single brand. So like, that was the first time like IBM made their 360 system and everything could be updated and backdated and stuff like that. So to go from that in the span of, like 20-ish years to like, you can now connect an Apple computer to a NASA communication system and email somebody in space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another, I mean, not to be cheesy about it, but it's actually another frontier. We're talking about space, like as a thing. But the idea that communication can exist between systems and now between, like space and terrestrial systems is also like, that's a new canvas. That's a new frontier in itself, that has its own, development arc from a technology perspective. So like, it's symbolic, right? That was an event that also happened in the midst of, Atlantis and everything that they were doing in space. It's like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think everyone, especially when you're a kid, everyone dreams like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to go to space and live on Mars? And how far off that seemed even 30 years ago, when things like this were starting to happen. And now it's like we're talking about building living quarters on foreign planets, and you'd still be able to like. The idea that is possible started with the seed of something like, can you even send an email? Can you get information from here to there that allows you to be like thriving and engaged from the other side of the solar system?
Yeah. And I think, the interesting flip there for me is, considering something as being possible or impossible versus sort of inevitable. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
And so, right, the idea is it possible to somehow colonize Mars? It's just like, when are we going to do it? And what are the enabling tools that are going to allow us to get there? So it's not even a matter of possibility anymore. We don't really think in those terms. I don't think about impossible. Doesn't really seem like a thing that feels like a constraint to us,
The constraint almost feels like, what are the tools that are available right this minute to make that happen? And then how do we develop the tools that make this inevitability reality?
But yeah, 100%. And part of the macro here is, what was represented in the Apple link, to NASA proprietary messaging, whatever they had going on there, is that it created the very first link between what would ultimately become infrastructure, and so like there was no infrastructure, so it was very much like the Wild West. There, without infrastructure, you have to have sort of a frontier mentality, and then with infrastructure, it's more of a development mentality, so because you're developing on known systems and infrastructure, and so the inevitability, I think, when we think about like more trips to the moon or to Mars or anything that you can sort of imagine right there, it's going to be predicated on the infrastructure that exists in order to do that.
Yeah.
So, right. And so the idea that we have, basically a mesh satellite network that can connect to what, the known internet at this point from space doesn't seem that even complex or even advanced to us at this point. but that's infrastructure that we continue to build on. And so the ideas are enabled by this sort of core infrastructure. And as that expands, the only constraint really is the physical distance, but the patterns are going to be the same, right? It's going to be like some infrastructure is going to attach to some other infrastructure that's going to enable all kinds of development to happen. It's no longer sort of the idea of it being impossible is just a matter of sort of what stage of development are we in.
Especially when you can stand out and look up at the night sky and see, rows of satellites being lifted off. And that just represents, like it represents a lot of things, but like in this context, it's look at how much more global communication we're enabling. Look at how much more, is it limited to global communication? What else can those satellites be used for up there once they've already been launched? And I think another side of that is like there gets to be some like muddy waters between like who owns that technology and how does that is it always for the betterment of things, of furthering scientific research? Is it for the betterment of people in general, or is it only benefiting the select few?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I mean, optimistically, you would think that it would be a unifying thing, but realistically, there's going to have to be some governance there, and we should assume that there are going to be territorial disputes, and so how do we deal with that as we expand? Which to a large degree, I think kind of brings us back to the first point, which is like what's the role in humanization? What's the role in scientists being as front and center as the science or the the innovators as much as the innovation, in making it feel like a we thing and not like a us and they kind of thing. There's a lot of we and they going on,
Yeah.
Right?
Because how much that it feels so quickly out of it feels so quickly out of control when you're kind of just like somebody who's sitting by the sidelines watching all of this innovation happen. And it's, I feel like that constant kind of tug with a lot of AI stuff where it's like, well, how much am I contributing to this tool by using it? And at what point do the makers of it have to assume responsibility for what they've created? That's going to keep happening. And how, what responsibility do we have on a literal universal scale when we have a hard time regulating ourselves with like computer chatbots?
Right. And is the earth flat?
Is it?
Right. I mean, the fact that ridiculous things are still open questions, it kind of,
yes,
it speaks to what you're saying, right? Which is like, it's cool to think about super responsible, super thoughtful people moving us forward, but we still struggle with very, very basic challenges that, that if we're not beyond that, how do we reconcile that growing disparity between colonization of Mars and, a simple thing like,
getting reliable internet in Asheville, North Carolina.
Or right. Yeah. I mean, practical problems like that, that not everyone has electricity,
Yeah.
I think that's a real interesting sort of dimension to innovation. So, I mean, when you think about space, that's like just at the edge of it, and it sort of highlights how the disparity.
Yeah. There are people who still don't have clean drinking water, and we're worried about how we're going to colonize Mars.
Yeah, I think one lens on it though that I've found helpful is that there's cross pollination, cross pollination.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one.
I think that's right. That's what I'm trying to say. So, a lot of stuff that goes into a space program because of all the constraints, like force a level of innovation in terms of like size or weight or like even code, like how verbose code is because they have to send telemetry across thousands of miles. There are all these constraints that have innovation that then cross-pollinates back into like, normal everyday things, So maybe a way to look at it is continued investment in things that seem like super futuristic, like space exploration, actually do have, you think about something like Starlink, maybe we can solve real world right now problems with, advancements that have their roots in things like space exploration or, satellite communication, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that's infrastructure. Enough, glass half full kind of way to look at it.
Yeah. Starlink is a super interesting example. I think that it's like in a lot of ways. One, the capacity they've had to launch systems for communication. I think something we've recently seen is the use of like turning them on and off to enable different people to have and not have access to that internet, which has been happening a lot in the Ukraine war. And it's like, what kind of responsibility does a private company have at that point too, to say like, we're going to be hands off. Everyone has access to this as a utility. How do we get from that where you're saying like this was built for something that was an out there idea, and how can we bring that back to say like this is something that now Starlink has so many satellites that they've enabled internet to be a basic utility anywhere in the world. That's a really cool thought process and like cool way to look at those large advancements and how they still can benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think from a governance and management standpoint, I mean, you can draw some cues from the way that free open source community works. Like a lot of open source software started as a similar idea. It's like, this is kind of it's a weird thing. It's an experiment. It can solve a niche problem, and we're going to develop a community around it. And it's community supported, it's community governed, like all of those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's utility for that library or whatever it may be. Thousands of people rely on it, and so there's an investment in order to have the utility. There's some really important sort of bigger macro lessons in that, and sort of shared responsibility and upkeep and that sort of thing. So probably some lessons learned from that we could apply to even bigger ideas, more global ideas.
Would you travel to space if given the option?
Would I do a one-way mission to save humankind, like, Hollywood style? Like, I'd probably do my duty there, but like, would I take a Virgin Galactic thing that just goes
funsies,
like super high and like real fast and for a quick lap around the globe? I don't know. I think that there are all kinds of like why would I do this? Kind of.
It's a lot of money. If it was free, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, right. There is that as well. Like, I just don't. It's almost like skydiving. Like, I'm not like opposed to skydiving, but I also like I'm not like dying to do it either. I think I kind of feel the same way about it. It's like, it would be like super cool, but
your life isn't going to be incomplete without it.
No.
No.
Send me the pictures.
Yes. Send me the pictures. I'll be drinking somewhere in a brewery. In the right room. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look what my friend's doing. Cheers.
Well, I'll be back.
Okay. Yes. Perfect closer.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast powered by Gun.io. We drop 2 episodes per week, so if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and come hang out with us again next week and bring all your internet friends. If you have questions or recommendations, just shoot us a Twitter DM at The Frontier Pod, and we'll see you next week.